Happy Friday, Jack. Hey, and we're just saying in the festive mood, which is great. I don't know. Am I festive? I got my Christmas tree back here. I don't know if
Oh,
you can even see it.
you are always
Um,
festive.
yeah, a little bit. I like it. I I wanted to fill you in on the updates.
Mhm.
Very interestingly, and I think this is a good topic for today, so bear with me.
All right.
Um, so thanks to anyone who watches this. Which is oddly a few people, maybe they're all us, but I tend to never watch it, which is I'm going to admit to you how the sausage is made, right? So after our discussions, you give me the video, and I what I do is I chop it up and I make a title for it, right? But to make the title, I put it into GPT and I ask like what's a good title for this, right? So I'm doing my best to not have to expend too much energy in this effort, and I think it turns out fine. I mean, it's always a mixed bag of things that we talk about. Um, so therefore, I make this little intro and then I paste it onto the rest of the video where I cut it. Now, anyone who's in the video editing world, or actually in any creative production world, will start to realize what happens to me is I end up watching the same thing over and over and over and over dozens of times to where, it becomes kind of nauseating, right? That I'm always watching myself. You're the good part of this, Jack. You're always good. It's
Thank
me
you.
finding a spot where I would shut up for a second so I can make the splice happen, right? So
Mhm.
you'd think I would learn by now. Anyway, so what you pointed out the other day as I uploaded the video, and this weird audio error came in, right? And
Mhm.
I'm sort of perplexed. So I go back to the original, I re-edit it, I re-upload it. And the thing is, every time you do this, hint, it takes time. All right. So just uploading it and then having YouTube go through its process
Mhm.
takes a good 15 minutes or so. So guess how many times I re-uploaded that video since you mentioned it.
Well, I think between 5 and 10.
Right. How long does it take to get sick of something, right?
Yeah, exactly. Mhm.
So I have no idea what went wrong with that video. In fact, I thought it'd make a great topic for today because what we should talk about is errors and mistakes, right? This is my favorite
Mhm.
topic when it comes to AI because infallibility seems built in to our mental model of AI, right?
Mhm.
Well, it's the smartest person on earth, Jack. Remember, it never makes any mistakes, or if it does, it's a
Well,
hallucination. But what I'm thinking is I've caught it lately making just rash errors,
mhm.
and what I think is even more amusing, and I'll give you the situation in just a second. But I did upload the video and thank you for pointing that out. And thank you for
Mhm.
looking at it. And thank for anyone who I looked through a couple just to make sure this didn't happen every single time because that'd be embarrassing, right? No wonder. Right? If you could only get past the bad intro, and then it just the audio clicked out. But anyway, the reason I brought it up is I was trying to write a little bit about corporate culture, I think, and I was looking for reasons to dish on Microsoft. Or no,
Mhm.
I think it was Meta. So I
Mhm.
was just looking for dirt on Meta, and what was interesting is I'm looking now at this ability to research and to make attributions. Uh, so it's not just making something up, as they say. It's actually got kind of a footnote, and which is good. And I think it's great at this, considering the difficulty one would have without a massive research library to do research. You've been there in the
Mhm.
past, right? Like it is, you really do need a lot of resources to do research.
Yeah, yeah. Typically, and a good printer, right? So that you can get those papers, on your desk, and reading PDFs from the screen is not the same as reading them from paper. Um, I think there's a value in having paper, kind of resources around you. So yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So as I said, as you can tell, I can do repetitive labor fine. I don't get better results, bad. But the thing that was interesting about this conversation with Claude, which, for a pretty sophisticated model, was I wanted to get citations of how crummy it was to work at Meta, which I figured isn't like that hot of a take, right? But what it kept doing is summarizing another company I was talking about. And then I looked at the resources and I looked at the citations, and they were all about this other company. So I said, hey, nice job, but no, this company, to which, now again, this may be just another sort of, I don't know what the prompt is on some of these things, but it was like, oh, I was just blaming you for making bad, citations. I did it myself. Oh, I am so embarrassed, or something like that, right? Like it's the I made a mistake thing we all do, which I'm still thinking this is a good topic. Are you with me so far? So
Oh yeah.
I asked it again, and it did it again. And then I pointed again, and it apologized so profusely, but it never left. Like its little Bayesian engine just broke, which I thought was really kind of fascinating, right? Because most people do accept, in most cases, the easy answer or whatever. And if you said, hey, you don't know anything about video editing, I'd say, well, no, yeah, I do. I have a fancy video editing suite, right? And I have a weekly podcast with my good friend Jack. So I think I know what I'm doing, but I don't know any reason why this video codec would get mangled in this way. Like it isn't mangled on my machine, right? Somehow it just gets mangled. And therefore, what I thought our topic for today is that in the paradise that is when everything is run by AI, things should break like way more than they do now. I keep thinking like we're the ones that keep the duct tape on this universe that we've created, don't you think? Anyway, I don't know. It's a long-winded startup, but what do you think of that as a topic?
Well, I think there is like several aspects to it, but there is this issue of a mistake, right? The role and the value of a mistake that sometimes is represented as a negative example, right?
Yeah.
That or kind of like an aspect to it, right? And from the early days of AI, right, this was very valuable information, right? Like having a positive example in the knowledge base only, right? Like, maybe very few of them, or even a large number of examples of a concept. For the machine learning environment, it was always kind of always half of the story, because if you are only talking about successes, then the AI will model a success, right? It will never have a concept of a failure, right? So it's always kind of have like a false positives, false
Hmm.
negatives, these kind of things also intertwined. So yeah, today, right, it's also very important to have those prompt structured around, those quote unquote multi-shot kind of structures where you kind of provide something that might be a good answer or a good relevant information, but
Hmm.
then also say, okay, don't go there, right? Don't analyze this stuff because that's not relevant. That would be a mistake, right? So you
Mm.
kind of so by definition, you have a lesson learned, right? Like from a positive thing, but also from the negative, from a mistake that you kind of put into the large language models context. And so yeah, so I think that if if we have AI that breaks down quite a bit and we allow the AI to learn from it, that would be great. If not, we just gonna sway the system perhaps in the wrong direction, and it's gonna not gonna have a concept of a mistake. Um, Maybe not an obvious mistake, but maybe kind of going in the wrong direction in the reasoning process. So yeah, I think there's something to it.
Hmm. Well, and this could be a setup too, that I'm trying to figure this out as part of this class, but we'll get there in a second because I'm 100% with you. In fact, I think the ability to make mistakes and triage them quicker, is that a good word to use? Triage? Anyway, to learn from mistakes, I think is kind of the only option. And we spoke yesterday, and I actually was telling Elizabeth that I had a very uncomfortable experience trying to buy something at a local Lowe's store, where I started to get this feeling of how difficult it was for anyone who worked there to make any kind of decision. So I haven't ever, maybe I haven't looked at this very closely, but when things are working like systems do, like they deal pretty easily, probably with 80%, and we're fine with that, right? Like most things are fairly routine, and even at this store, most people are asked to check themselves out, right? So whatever security camera gizmo, whatever that keeps people from stealing everything, that we figured out. But they said that, hey, it's not a high value thing to have somebody run a barcode through a scanner, right? You can do it yourself, and we'll save money, and people will get through the line quicker. And I mean, we've seen that become a little more ubiquitous, right? I mean, you're kind of used to that in some ways, but I always thought that the shopkeeper role wasn't just to scan stuff. You see what I mean? That's sort of like this down the road role that you're asked to play, right? Whereas really a shop person who deals with the shop is dealing with everything. What are people buying? What problems have you ever asked? Hey, did you find everything? Okay, that used to be the kind of thing that, by the way, the self shop out never asks you that, right? It doesn't care, right? It's just an operation. So I guess what I was getting at is I asked them to do this thing that they weren't used to do, and the entire system broke down. Nobody could make any decision, and anyone who did, even when they told the other person couldn't make a decision. And sooner or later, I just ended up leaving, which I guess isn't the greatest thing, but I got a little bit like, you know what I mean? Who are you here to help? Right? If you are just there maintaining your own job, which is absolutely reasonable, right? Like, hey, you need to be employed 100%. You need to do what you are told. But what I thought was, once you start to take out the autonomy of decision making from so many jobs, that it is bad. Maybe we're off on sociological stuff now, but you know what I mean? The I guess it goes into the point of errors. Like, well, people can't make a decision because they would make the wrong decision. And I'm like, well, that's not solving anything. Right? I don't know.
Yeah, so kind of wearing my AI hat again, right? I mean, if we kind of interpret the situation that you had at the store in terms of like a information theoretic problem, right? Was the problem with the fact that these people didn't have enough information to answer your question or help you out? Um, that was just an access problem, right? Like maybe maybe there was a binder somewhere that they could open and help you out, right? Or maybe there was something that they could type into the system and find the appropriate size of the screw or the washer or whatever you needed, right?
Yeah.
Or simply you gave them a reasoning problem that even with the information available, they wouldn't be able to connect the dot, right? Like I had a similar problem. A while ago, I was buying like a wooden like a fireplace, like a wooden wood stove, and obviously you need to have the equipment to it. You need basically the chimney assembly, right?
Yeah.
And so I asked them, hey, here's this wood stove, and can you find me the appropriate size of the pipe, right, that goes through the
Right.
roof?
Yeah, sure.
That was an impossible task, right? So they couldn't help me, right? They didn't know what's the size supposed to be. There's some regulations, how long that metal thing is supposed to be. What's the material that goes through the roof? That was something that I had to actually go back home and research and then just order online based on some sort of a drawing that I found, right? So yeah, so there could be like several reasons where if AI is present in the same spot, extremely polite and infinitely helpful, right? Answering, infinite amount of questions and clarifications, wouldn't be able to do a better job, or maybe not because either there was no information or there was not enough reasoning capability or not enough search capability in the system so that the dots couldn't be connected, or and that's how the breakdown occurs, right?
Yeah. I mean, I like the analogy, come to think of it, because that's what we do in a complicated world, right? We're solving really complicated problems pretty much daily. I just put in the laundry and I'm always amazed, right? That this what used to take, most persons, day of work to do laundry is now just an afterthought, right? You just throw it in and that's it. Like it doesn't even take any special skill. It's one button, you know, and the only thing that happens is when it breaks down, and then you have to have a whole new, you have to have a whole new set of skills. Our dishwasher broke down about a year ago, and I was just determined, like, I can do dishes. It's not conceptually difficult. But it was weird that after quite a while, I started to realize how many, that my habits had been like, we use way too many dishes, right? And we don't clean as we go, which is kind of a thing, right? We amass, and that, see, it's like it is a real problem, more of like problem management, let's call it this. So the problem that they had is they needed to override a price. Well, overriding a price is this is the highest level of of whatever. And everyone could say, they said, you don't need to. It's already, it's all fine. We already got all this approved, but the person, didn't want to stick their neck out. I don't know. They just didn't want to do it, to be quite honest, because there wasn't really any, the going outside of your comfort zone. And to your point about the stove, I'm kept thinking of not the good old days, but the olden days when you'd have a craftsperson, let's say, for example, a joiner or I think they were all called joiners, right? Because they made windows. So guess what size windows you got? Whatever size you needed, because they had the skill to make a window, right? So you'd come in and you could just make them. And now, did you make them in a particular way? Sure, but you didn't, you could make them any particular size. You see what I mean? You had so many variables that you could easily handle. But now nobody can make a window, right? You just don't have the ability or skill. What you can do is go to a place that has a window that's been built, and yes, they're wonderful, right? We'll just give it to Windows. Windows are great, better than they were, but you don't have the flexibility. So I'm not sure if we're getting at anything, right? Because I guess generative AI would be one of the most flexible search tools, right? It doesn't get bogged down in semantics as much. You remember when Google, you could misspell things, that was like a miracle, right? That you didn't have to know how to spell things. Well, okay, so now you got a really kind of flexible interface, but my point is, I think even more than ever, you have to now be really critical of what it finds. You know what I mean? Like you don't know its sources, as many say, right? And you don't know kind of where it derived these things, and all of its stuff will appear to be pretty good. Like it was pretty good at complaining about Meta until it was actually complaining about SC Johnson Wax. So then what I kept thinking is like, well, okay, maybe you can just complain about everything. Nobody's going to call you on it, right? Like, oh, you're just mischaracterizing a great firm or something, But that's the other problem, right? Is like, what are your goals? You need to have safety in your typing so that you do not asphyxiate yourself, I would assume. Like this is actually slightly critical. Or a misfit over time would be really detrimental, right? You could get a little bit or bad. There's like little insidious things that could happen because you don't know what you're doing, but you also don't know somebody who knows what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
This isn't a big money-making career to install wood stoves. You probably would find it difficult, outside of just generalists. So it's just puzzling because I think we really, really need experts. You're one, of course. I have my niche, but the expertise often has a lot to do with recognizing whether or not the person has actual skill or whether they're just good at BSing, which I
Mm.
definitely have a little bit of that, right? I can probably fake it fairly well. And I have plumbed a lot of my house, over the years just because I know the basics and I can fix a few things because I know the basics. Um,
Mm. Yeah.
but you
Yeah, well,
know,
the problems that you're describing is kind of at a different level, even if we kind of like again translate it into the AI world, right? So my problem with the stove and the chimney was that it was kind of like a search problem, right? Like
mhm.
finding the appropriate thing, right? What you are saying is at a different level, right? So it's kind of like a governance, AI governance problem, right? Like,
Hmm.
okay, so let's say I'm talking, I'm at the register, I am talking to the AI system, and I would like the AI system to change the price of the product, right?
Yes,
And
sure.
and then let's assume that the system doesn't have anything like a discount in it, right? So we have the AI will have to make a very significant decision
Hmm.
about, is it possible for the AI to change the price of the product, right? Maybe because, you are a repeat customer and you want to keep the customer satisfied, and you know that if you change the price, then the customer is very likely to come back, and even though he or she paid less right now, will in the future be a satisfied customer, will come back, will pay more, right? So this is kind of like a knowledge that can exist in, I'm sure it exists today internally within the AI system, right? The
Hmm.
AI will be able to make this connection, right? Like happy customer is a good customer. Happy customer is a more profitable customer because it will be a repeat process, right? So I'm seeing that a lot in the AI work that I'm doing in legal space, right? Like
Yeah.
there is a lot of deep inference into the legal space, and all I need to do sometimes is tell the AI, hey, you are allowed to look into your own vast knowledge of the AI space, of the legal space, right? To make maybe inferences that I'm not specifically prompting because there's no way I can have a prompt that covers all the legal relevant stuff, right?
Yeah,
So,
sure.
so that could be one thing, right? Can the AI be programmed to make that executive decision, right? That maybe requires me going beyond the store manager level of governance, right? So that's one thing, right? Or perhaps the AI will be equipped already with the knowledge that there is a discounting program within the store, and you have some, as an AI system, you have some sort of a latitude here, right? Like, hey,
Yeah.
it's
Oh, no, that
Christmas.
sounds,
It's
that's
Christmas,
really interesting. Yeah.
the AI will kind of be happy to, let's say you spend $200, the AI will kind of display on screen or tell you, hey, we can give you 5% Merry Christmas, right? So that's something that can be, programmed into those AI systems relatively easily, right? Even the first thing, right? The first thing is a governance programming problem. The second one, if let's say this discounting is available, it's kind of like a easy kind of like a optimization problem. You will know that the volume of the product that goes through that register equipped with that AI willing to give people discounts during Christmas, for example, is
Hmm.
going to have more higher amount of turnovers. I mean, higher amount of customers going through that particular register. So all those are interesting problems that we very soon will be facing with AIs,
Hmm.
in different contexts.
Well, you can educate me because I do agree with you, although I'm assuming, and this is just from very slight anecdotal evidence, as usual, right?
Mm.
I heard it once and therefore it's true. But to your legal question, I think what is interesting is that feeling true. And I'm going to be harping on that in a minute, right? Like I think innately humans are pretty good at this, right? Like that is kind of our superpower is that we are pretty good at anchoring and understanding most things. That's why I guess when we go abroad, I can tell you I hated the country of Sweden because I could not understand their currency. Right? Like I didn't know how much anything cost and everything looked bad. And the same thing I'll say with Australia. Sorry, I like Australia, but their dollar is way out of line with ours. And yet they call it a dollar, right? And it looks like our currency. So you're just looking at everything looking really expensive. And the reason I brought that up is that, again, I'm sure most of the legal system is about some sense of intuitiveness, right? Like, don't steal from, try to do whatever. All these things are probably ingrained in the whole fabric of it, is that you can't be unfair on purpose, super unfair. Let's hope. So therefore that is the cornerstone of the debate, is I don't have to go in and read all the law in order to say, hey, this doesn't seem fair, right? Because I actually know that law is based on harm. Hey, if you're harmed and you're harmed by this entity, then we can now bring this to law, right? Like it's about literal harm. Whereas people being upset about things or don't liking things or whatever usually doesn't end up in court. Because it says, yeah, okay, the burden is that you have to have some actual harm happening to you. And that might be why corporate stuff can be a little bit nuanced, right? Like you didn't make enough money this year. Well, it's obviously Meta's fault, right? Because we're blaming Meta in this podcast. Sorry, Meta, but you can do that. And I did. I just got actually, what was it? I got $60 from Meta because they did something that apparently affected me that I didn't like, that someone brought a case up. Anyway, you see what I mean? That's the other ridiculous part of this, right? Is that someone really got a lot of money out of Meta, but it certainly wasn't me. But I was the one that was harmed, but along with, maybe a couple million other people. Anyway, drop in the bucket, right? Okay, but back to this idea of what was I getting at, is that the innate thing that we do, the AI, as far as I know, is already, I think somebody said, like the price of something just doubled over a year, and then they discount it by half. So what you're basically paying the same thing you were, but it says that it's half off. You see what I mean? Like this pricing mechanic, to my idea, and forgive me, you can correct me, is not AI. It's machine learning, right? Like it is deterministic. It isn't creative, like my example with blaming Meta. Like I want narrative about why Meta is terrible, and it gave me Meta, or it attributed to being about Meta, but it was actually about another company because it just got its little Bayesian wires crossed. Does that make sense? Am I wrong? I'm sorry, am I getting it wrong?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, so I'm always trying to translate this in this kind of situation into into an agentic AI kind of like situation, right? So what you are talking about, let's say in terms of fairness, right? So it might be interesting to kind of start the discussion with an AI agent that that you might that in the case where the agent will have price latitude. It might be interesting that that there perhaps will be possibilities that you jailbreak your price at the store.
Sure.
If the AI is controlling the price, right? So you might be able to kind of start a conversation pretty much like today, with ChatGPT.
It's reminding me of trying to cancel cable. Remember that, where they do
Exactly.
everything they can. Except it'll be AI now. Like, no, you can't cancel cable. Come on, anyway, half off for you. Come on, like.
So that for AI engineers, that will be an interesting problem to solve, right? Like you might have all the best intentions, you will infuse the AI with all the economic knowledge about happy customers, higher amount of transaction leads to higher profit rather than maybe lower amount of transaction with high prices. I mean, all that stuff, you might be able to program, but then somebody will show up perhaps with their own agent on their phone and will start jailbreaking the cash register AI, and
I
will
would
kind
hope
of
so.
start.
I mean, that's the beauty of things, right? Like somebody's going to do it.
Yeah, and try to talk the Loves or Menards agents to get them like 100% discount, right? That kind of thing. And So yeah, so these kind of things will be happening, quite a bit, because we are already seeing the movement in the AI circles about, the guardrails. Like, hey, you are not supposed to be talking about unions within the organizations because that is
Right.
sensitive. You're not supposed to be talking about the legal stuff because that there's policies and they are untouchable, right? So, but then, you might actually create a clever formulation. Like just yesterday, I saw a video that came from Anthropic, and apparently, they were kind of half bragging about the fact that you could use Anthropic to actually orchestrate cyber attacks. And then
Oh,
they
right.
will
Yeah,
they
yeah, yeah. I did see
and
that.
then
Right.
yeah,
Sure.
and then they would say, oh, actually, that's not our intention. Anthropic is a great model, but that's not really for cyber attacks, but it is a great model, right? And then they are talking, okay, so how do we stop it, right? And it turns out it's very difficult, right? Because I might have for example, a conversation about the cyber attack that is sounds harmful, but I can say, hey, this is kind of like hypothetical. I'm just trying to educate myself, or I'm taking a class,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that's a
Well, this
very
is like me
simple.
uploading a video. Most people
Yeah.
don't know how anything works anyway, right? But
Exactly,
they
yeah.
do
So
understand harm,
yeah,
attacks. So there you go, right? Like you're in the
yeah,
midst of human nature versus computer weirdness constantly.
exactly. So you don't have to have too much dark knowledge about AI to actually start the conversation that is is going to circumvent pretty much all the guardrails that an AI engineer might have been placing into the system.
Well, I guess my pause is, of course, that machine learning algorithms are deterministic, right? That's the whole point. They just are have a nicer, let's just call it fuzzy math. Is that a good term for it, right? Like they aren't maybe don't have as many of hard stops in order to keep them running more efficiently, right?
Well,
Like they they yeah.
let me
Okay.
just maybe reformulate that. So they are not necessarily deterministic. Like there's algorithms that are not, right? But let's say if you run the machine learning algorithm, the classical kind of understanding, if you run it 10 times, chances are that all the time you will be getting very, very similar, if not the same answer,
Okay.
right? So in a way, that's a deterministic outcome. But the underlying algorithm can be actually probabilistic, right? Which or non-deterministic in nature. So yeah. So functionally, you're right, but
I'm just saying
uh,
it's that big huge language issue that we have
mhm,
about generative AI, which is deliberately deliberately isn't supposed to be deterministic, right? It has temperatures, like you can make it hallucinate pretty easily, but its usefulness comes from its broader training plus just the magic part, right? Like it just can do things that are pretty undetermined. I think I just heard another I think it was who's the Eric Schmidt, right?
mhm,
He
mhm,
used to be in Google, and he was just going on about how generative AI is going to take everybody's job and change the whole world, and the same infinity problem or the linearity problems that we already have. My point, and I hope we keep saying this to our each other and our listeners, is like we're humans are really good at a lot of this stuff already right now, and we're teaching generative AI to be good at it, right? To be nice, to be apologetic, to be
mhm,
friendly, but we can do all this. You know what I mean?
mhm,
Like we've already, and we're also incredibly sophisticated if given the power to build windows and do, you know what I mean? We're really good at problem solving. I just think it's weird that we kind of flip the coin, like it's going to be good at everything because it pretends and has this ability to do things that are like us. That's all,
mhm.
and I'm just trying to get
Yeah.
off that train because then it just gets a lot harder because I saw a thing today, which was back to this thing about replacing all the jobs, and it was a guy who was saying like, well, and maybe it was hard to tell whether he's lying. This is the other part I need to bring up in just a moment about lies, but he just said that he's was in charge of putting Bing into his enterprise, and everybody on the higher ups is like, you must bring AI to everything, and the whole bit about AI. And he said, yeah, he did, but found basically that like nobody used it. But then he just decided when he reported it, he'd just say he had everybody use it. Like he did, he basically made up all the stats and he brought it up to his boss and he's like, yeah, we've seen this productivity increase or whatever. So he made up all these statistics and no one, of course, ever checks on these things because of course, right? But apparently these all got then reported out, and then Microsoft is now using it to tout how great Bing. You see what I mean? Like the chain of what we think something is and doing to the reality is vast. Even now, as we're in our second year of all this, right? Like we thought everything would be fast, but instead, like I think it still comes down to, well, I still don't think we know what to do with it, right? Like I think it's really, really useful, and I think it's fabulous if you can really focus. But to your point about pricing models and stuff like this, we've already solved this with some really sophisticated, really sophisticated machine learning tools, right? Machine learning probably deals with things like, I mean, we have Knowles Scholes or Scholl, whatever the algorithm that prices the futures of everything. These aren't terribly clever, but they're really useful, right? They don't model the future, but they are the future because that's the only way, we just kind of made up the future. Said, yeah, I can buy this for this amount of money today. And so we have these really sophisticated instruments, none of which are based on reality is what I'm getting at, right? None are based on anything but pretty much good faith. And I don't want to extend that yet to AI, right? I'm pretty impressed with it. I think it does a wonderful job, but I'm trying to hold out my it's going to take over narrative, because I like it, you like it, but we're weirdos.
Yeah, yeah, you can say that.
Yeah, but but good weirdos. We like the future, we like playing around with things that are sort of puzzling, right? And most people, I don't think they do, right?
Yeah, I think part of it is also that we read AI, right? Like like you introduced me to Neil Stevenson and the Snow Crash, and then since then I've read most of his books, I think, and prior to that I was reading Lem, and other prolific authors, and there was always robots that were intelligent there, right? There was always
Sure.
AI on a spaceship, and sometimes the AI goes rogue, and sometimes there's a problem, and then we have Nexus robots, in wonderful movies which have internal problems. They want to live, right? They have
That's true.
feelings, right? Right? They understand longevity, and they understand that if they stop functioning, then that's it. They cannot be restarted. So all those human feelings were infused in those sci-fi stories, and those AI systems. So in a way, right, for us, maybe it's kind of like hey, this AI is just what I was reading my whole life about, and then now it's just here. So what, right? So yoo-hoo, right?
Well, right.
Not such a big deal.
We see it as like a mirror, right? We
Yeah.
really enjoy it because we've kind of thought about it for a long time, and then suddenly it's there. I mean, I was just trying to get my computer to stop acting badly, and I kept thinking, God, it's been just babysitting this thing for the past 20 years, right? Like you're always doing something dumb to keep your computer from misbehaving. But I'm like,
Yeah.
most people don't care, I would hope, right? They have better things to do. But we've been care and feeding of these weird devices for so long, and now that this new device comes in, and suddenly, I mean, today, not to go off on another tangent, but I was just realizing, remember the whole cloud thing? That thing is
Mm.
miraculous. But it's old hat now. I mean, I just saw a thing about how Git works, and I'm like, that even Git is surprisingly not as sophisticated as I thought it was. You know what I mean? But we kind of always are saying like the outcome is miraculous. So therefore the technology must be miraculous. So maybe my deep humanism is like, we're miraculous, right? We, you know, do amazing things, but we tend to kind of ignore how great that is, and we only are interested when we do something really extreme, you know, like Tom Hanks or something. Like, you know, he's just a normal person. It just so happens that he's good at pretending to be other people for a few minutes while a camera's rolling. You know what I mean? Like, actually, I think down deep, he's probably just a normal person. Maybe Neil Stevenson is, he might be strange though. I don't know about that guy. He, you know, but you think he's just sitting around the pub like a normal bloke, you know, uh,
Yeah,
talking about
yeah, yeah.
sports.
Yeah, there's, William Gibson, he's doing, he's building those deep stories about distributed AIs,
Right.
and
Yeah, sure.
space and time. Um, so all this, kind of in a way that is something that maybe it's kind of like happening, like right now. I mean, it feels like a lot. It feels a lot easier if let's say if you digested Snow Crash, and maybe Peripheral by William Gibson. It's kind of like easier to build AI systems because you kind of
Right.
you,
Well,
you
yeah,
almost have an
it's
example. You almost have
making
a
fun of
working
meta.
example. Yeah, almost a working example in the story, right? So you're
Right.
kind of trying to borrow something from that, and now it's doable, right? And if you feel like it's not doable, you can generate code, through another system that is going to make that happen, right? So I think that yeah, this is an exciting time.
I think
Yeah.
again, I'm very enthusiastic, but I guess I'm saying I'm trying to be more appreciative of people than ever. And I think people feel underappreciated. That may be it. I don't want them to be bummed out. I get it, right? Like
Mm,
it seems depressing. And
mm,
that's, I think, more of the system as is. That's why these people did not seem to be enjoying their job and couldn't override the price, right? It didn't seem like a really enabling profession. It seemed like a
mm,
job, you know?
mm,
And I think when we get taken away from that as people, you know, we get taken away of our agency. Yeah, over
mm,
time, I think it really plays a role in our feeling, you know, and how we feel about ourselves and others, right? I think that could be a big American thing, but every time I'm abroad, I don't feel that, right? It's like people seem to be like much more relaxed.
mm.
And they don't seem to worry about AI that much. They don't seem to worry about much of anything because their culture seems less um, system oriented than us, right? We rely upon a great deal of innovation. And I think really when you look at other countries, what's interesting too is that we had to sort of build out the phone system, you know, that's why we're one in the phone hierarchy. You know, that's our code because we built it, right? Whereas everybody else, okay, your area code or area number two or whatever. I don't know all the codes, but you know what I mean, right?
Mm.
We're number one just because
Yeah.
we created it. And I think when we created a lot of these technologies, we were the guinea pigs. You know, we didn't get the best of the best. We were the early adopters. And so we paid more. We you know, never really got this. But other countries, for example, I know my friend was in Africa, right? They never built a plain telephone system. They couldn't ever do it. It's just too vast. So they
Mm,
only were able to do this going straight to cellular. But once they went straight to cellular, everything was in cellular, right? All banking, all communications, everything was
mm.
automatically done on your phone.
Yeah.
Whereas for us, you know, we still have ATMs everywhere. You know what I mean? We still have all this kind of ancient infrastructure because we never really, you know, we didn't change quickly enough, right? Even
Mm,
I'm probably the only person I only pay with my watch.
mm.
And I've seen and I've noticed many people say you are the only person I've seen that has ever done that. I was like, wow, they introduced this like 5 years ago.
Mm.
You know, I mean, it's old hat to me because I'm like, yeah, I mean, of course, why wouldn't you? You know, it's easier, it's XYZ. But that's what I
Mm.
mean. We're weirdos. Caveat. where it
Yeah,
is.
yeah. I think that appreciation problem is pretty deep. I mean, yesterday we heard a story from our friend Doug, right, about his son in being at the university, and the professors now change the format of the tests. Now it's a multiple choice, and there is like 20 choices per question. I mean, this is crazy, right? I mean,
That
uh,
is actually
this is
crazy, but yes.
yeah, I mean, it sounds like they are not appreciating the students because now the format of the exam is potentially skewing the outcomes. I mean, I don't know if I would be able to perform well on a test where there's 20 options for each questions, right? I mean, I've never done that, and maybe there's somebody who can thrive in that kind of like structure, but there might be people who will be totally lost, right? So they are not empowering people in a way. They are punishing them, with a superimposed structure and complexity on top of the subject matter complexity, so that they are ensuring that AI is not used. I mean, I mean, I don't know what to think about it, but it doesn't sound right.
I mean, personally, I think I told the story too that I graded my students and I could tell when they used AI because it was kind of obvious in some ways, but I don't mind it. I mean, my point is can you tell a good story? That's
Mm.
really it. Like, can you engage somebody and uh, kind of use less personal language in order to discuss like why something is, right? Can you I don't know, it's an interesting term. Maybe I brought it up last week. Did I talk about Fermiizing?
Yeah, yes, it is.
Oh, okay. So I love the story though. But the idea of like, can you break down a problem and solve a problem even though you don't have any direct knowledge of all the mechanics of the problem? Because what happens is, as you said, if you're brittle, you brittle, you have 20 choices, right? Because if you have 20 choices, you have zero choices. That's all there is to it.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah,
I mean, like
exactly.
that,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
That
It's
doesn't exist. In fact, I'm a human computer interaction expert, and I will tell you that I try to keep to three. I think people could manage three states in their head, right, as potential choices. I think
mm,
five, you're getting way out of whack, right? And then this is the whole like dinner menu problem, which is the more choices you have, the less satisfying it is. And we were at a place last night. In fact, we went to eat Vietnamese food, and this made itself clear. Like we're looking at the menu and there's so many options, right? This is the idea. Like here's everything else, but what you end up knowing after being around for a while is it's all the kind of the same thing. Right? Like, and if you're getting this soup, which is called pho, right? You get pho soup. It's like the whole point of this meal is that this broth is really hard to make and
mm,
it's really delicious. But that's it. And then you just put stuff in it. Makes no difference, right? Like this is just a delicious broth and you put stuff in it. What would you like to have put in it? And normally it does come with like some lemons and sprouts or whatever. And it's like any kind of these meals. But when they laid it out, it was so daunting because without pictures and such,
mm.
you were just at a loss. So I'm using that as the same example of having 20 choices on a multiple choice exam. We ended up ordering, and by the way, it was terrible because the broth wasn't very good. And it was like,
Mm.
well, oh no, sorry. Not only is there no learning involved, right? Like you couldn't have made a good choice. And that's what was really also kind of leading to my little bit of dissatisfaction with agency, right? Like, well, if you can't make this broth, you really shouldn't have a restaurant called pho. Like that to me is like its only rule.
Mm.
But then when I thought about it and if you start to extrapolate like that, it's like, well, people seem to be sitting at other tables. People seem to be eating, I mean, it had calories, I don't know. They weren't suffering. They weren't harmed by this. But to me, it was all very I didn't like it. You know what I mean? Like it to me,
Mm.
that's the biggest problem is when things when basically people start lying. You know, they weren't not having a good day. They didn't really put the effort in, whatever. Nobody will notice, right? Like this person who wouldn't sell me the thing, after a while, I'm just sort of standing there, wouldn't speak to me, wouldn't tell me anything, you know, just sort of was waiting. And then the person said, "Hey, you should go help these other people." And to me, that was kind of when I'm like, okay, I'm leaving because you know what? Like, if I don't even count, like, then your job kind of doesn't count either, right? Because you're only
Mm.
here to help people do X, you know? Otherwise, I could check myself out to see what I mean. And
Mm.
that's really disheartening. And I don't want to be a bummer, but do you ever experience that? Am I just overreacting? Maybe I just had a bad week.
Yeah, yeah, I can see, the dilemma here, right? Like, I mean, there's a decision space, right, at the end of the purchasing process, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that decision space may be kind of just, a few states, like, the customer paid versus the customer didn't pay. But there could be more, right? Like, and again, this kind of goes into the autonomy question, right? The person that you were talking to really was very limited in their autonomy, right? I'm not trying to criticize their IQ or
No,
whatever,
no, not
I
at
mean,
all.
who
And I
knows, right?
wasn't either. I mean,
But yeah, but there is those a few decision choices, and perhaps a junior person will have on kind of like successful checkout or escalate to the older, to the supervisor, right? And then the supervisor is kind of maybe have the same two choices, right? Successful outcome, or escalate, or say goodbye, right? So maybe three,
yeah.
right? So at this stage, right, we are kind of looking at this as being kind of representative of an old technology, right? That would be an expert system, right, from 40 years ago,
Yeah, I
right?
loved expert systems. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but today, right, we have systems that have a lot more flexibility, right, and can create their own decision space because after the conversation, you might come up with 20 other options, right? Like, hey, maybe we will, deliver, later, or we will maybe email, the supervisor, and supervisor will kind of come back, or whatever, right? So the decision space around your question or your problem can have states that will actually, and some of them will satisfy you, right?
Sure.
Right. So not all of them have to be kind of like unsuccessful outcomes for you, right? So then there is a model, right? So there is a affective reasoning model, right? Of what the satisfaction state is for you, right?
Hmm.
Maybe more than just purchase, right? It could be other things also, because maybe you will not purchase, but you will be satisfied with the process, right? So all this is kind of an interesting thing. And then I think the beauty of the AI right now is that we may not need to program everything
Yeah,
explicitly.
yeah.
Explicitly. Yeah.
Well, which gets back, I think, to your interesting analogy about the assessment, right? That you have to come in person and you have to choose from 20 things. What makes it more interesting to me now is like, what if four of those things could be true? You see what I mean? Like, what if this problem isn't your traditional multiple choice problem, right? That there is multiple answers. Or basically that there's some deterministic, because certainly when I read someone's paper that they wrote, I'm not looking to see like, I'm not necessarily looking to see what grade to give them. I'm looking to see if they figured out something from the efforts that we made over the past 10 weeks together, right? Like that could be the idea of,
Mm.
I think I wrote about it a long, long time ago, but the piano page turner. You know, their job is extremely, extremely easy. Right? They're just sitting there in a concert while someone, masterfully, plays this beautiful tune and they just need to turn the page. However, I think that relationship is far from easy. Well, first of all, they have to read music. First, they have to
Mm.
actually know a lot of stuff that's going on, and they're also in a fairly high failure state. Like, if they're not attuned to what's going on, then flipping the thing at the wrong time is actually pretty disastrous. But it's a fabulous position to learn from somebody who has maybe was a page turner once themselves. And that's the idea of being in a band where you're not the best person in the band. But what you're going to do is you're going to get better, hopefully. You're going, if you have well, it's the same thing. If you have a good drummer in a band, you have a good band. I mean, there's no doubt about it, right? It is the least I mean, it's the most awful position in a band because nobody could care less. But if they're good, every band is better because their drummer's better, right? But nobody wants to do the job. Right? It's actually, it's a terrible, terrible position. Everything else is easier. You can be a terrible guitarist and still, or whatever, you know what I mean? You don't have to be actually good at most things, except maybe bass playing you have to be, but there's only so many notes, right? I mean, you can just, right? I mean, maybe we're bringing it full circle since we're ending here. I'm like, we need to appreciate our drummers. We do, right? Like the drummers make everything happen.
Yeah. I have an anecdote about the keyboard players, and yeah, you are right that there is some situations where there is a big concerto and the pianist needs to kind of have that a little help, but in most cases the pianist actually is not reading the notes, right? They already memorized the whole thing, and they just need to have, I notice myself, right? Like if I have the notes opened in front of me, even if they are on the wrong page, right? I play better comparing to, let's say, if the notes are closed, and it's not just me apparently, and I'm nobody, I'm just an amateur player, but there is a very well-known pianist. His name is Jordan Rudess, and he is the keyboardist for the Dream Theater. And he is always playing with his iPad on, and he is actually manually with his foot switching pages, with the notes.
Yeah.
And I have absolutely zero doubt that he doesn't need this. He could probably improvise any piece he wanted, and play it, without anything, like even without any prep. But he always plays with the notes in front of him. So there's something psychological, I think, about this. And but this, if you are playing a concerto, I think there's too many notes on the page for you to comprehend, to actually have that. There's not enough bandwidth to kind of read the notes and actually play them. So I think it's just a kind of like a psychological thing, and maybe there's something to be said, right, about the kind of this situation where like human brain kind of requires this context, right? That is maybe not information, but kind of like comfort. And right now the AI doesn't have that, right? The AI has the information, requires information to be in the context, but maybe there's kind of like another step, kind of going beyond what we've got, is that pianist requires the knowledge that information is there, not necessarily the knowledge of the information, specifically. Right? So it's an interesting thing that you brought up.
Honestly, I think you've said something really profound, right? Is that that's why I don't believe in AGI, right? Because you don't need the knowledge. You need the confidence. In fact, speaking of which, I can end this because I was listening to this thing about Elon Musk, our favorite guy who still hasn't sponsored us. But apparently he, speaking of sci-fi books, as a youngster, he read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And he found that it brought him out of his shell of being a total dork, like whatever, we all are. But he said, what struck him was the answer 42, right? The meaning of the universe is 42. And he thought, yes, if you could only ask better questions, you'll get better answers. With the irony being, just like with Snow Crash, these things were satire. They were supposed to be making fun of our existing world. And the reason why it's 42 isn't to be profound. It was just to be silly, because that was the point. And it's interesting that we sort of, as we miss the point, I guess, sometimes, that, we make things into something that they're not. Maybe that's a tangent for the next conversation, but you see what I mean? It's really to say, you need the foundation in front, the foundation is there to make you feel comfortable. It takes you back to when you had first experienced this piece or something. But now you don't need it anymore, but you still want it there. It's like that Linus's blanket. It's like this thing. It just keeps you, I'm doing pretty good. Maybe someday we'll just need AI around just to make us like not be scared of something.
Yeah.
But
That's
like
right.
you said, we don't really need it. I don't know. Always good times, Jack.
Yeah,
Next
yeah.
one will, I guess, be our big holiday thing. Maybe we'll get Jack, or maybe we'll get Doug to come. It'd be fun because I
Yeah,
didn't
maybe. Yeah,
share with you my project. I'll do that next time.
okay, sounds great. Yeah, yeah. Let's plan on something for next week. Yeah.
Sounds good. All right. Have a good one.
Yeah. You too. See you.
See ya.